Ethan, if you truly want to become CEO, you must spend 6 months as a security guard. 32-year-old Ethan Montgomery stared at his mother, convinced he had heard her wrong. What? Victoria Montgomery didn't repeat herself immediately. She sat behind a massive walnut desk on the 58th floor of Montgomery Enterprises, looking out across the Chicago skyline. The woman sitting before Ethan wasn't simply his mother. At 61, Victoria Montgomery was one of America's most successful self-made businesswomen. 30 years earlier, she'd started a small logistics company with 4 employees, 2 rented trucks, and barely enough money to pay the bills. Now Montgomery Enterprises employed more than 8,000 people across the United States. Its headquarters stood like a monument in downtown Chicago. And Ethan was Victoria's only child. Everyone assumed he would inherit the CEO's office. Everyone except Victoria. She stood and walked toward the window. "You heard me." Ethan laughed. "You're serious?" "Completely. Mom, I've spent 10 years preparing for this position. I have an MBA. I've managed acquisitions. I've negotiated contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's exactly the problem." Ethan frowned. Victoria turned toward him. "You know how to negotiate with billionaires. You know how to impress investors. You know what to say in a boardroom." She paused. "But do you know the name of the woman who cleans your office every night?" Ethan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Victoria nodded. "Exactly. That's not fair. What's her name?" Ethan looked away. "I don't know. What about the security guard downstairs? The one who's been opening that door for you for 4 years?" Again, silence. Victoria walked closer. "You want to lead 8,000 people, Ethan. But you barely see the people who don't have impressive titles. I'm not disrespectful to them. I didn't say you were. Then what's this about?" Victoria's voice softened. "Leadership isn't just about avoiding cruelty. It's about seeing people." Ethan studied her face. There was something else. Something she wasn't telling him. What happened? Victoria returned to her desk. Over the last 18 months, employee complaints have increased dramatically. Turnover is up. Several departments have become toxic. And every time I ask senior management what's happening, they tell me everything is fine. Then investigate. I have. And? They know they're being investigated. Ethan finally understood. Victoria needed someone inside the company whom executives wouldn't recognize as a threat. And she had chosen him. "You want me to spy on our employees?" "No." Victoria shook her head. "I want you to watch." "What's the difference?" "A spy searches for wrongdoing. I want you to discover who people really are when they believe nobody important is watching." She pushed a folder across the desk. Inside was an employee ID. Ethan Miller, Security Services. His last name had been changed. His photograph was already on the badge. Ethan stared at it. "You planned this before asking me." Victoria smiled. "I know my son. And if I refuse? Then you're not ready to be CEO." Ethan looked at the badge again. 6 months. Security guard. No executive office. No assistant. No private elevator. And most importantly, nobody could know who he was. He closed the folder. "When do I start?" "Monday. 6 a.m. Victoria sat down. "And Ethan?" He turned. "You may learn things about this company that you wish you hadn't." Ethan smiled. "I can handle it." Victoria didn't smile back. "I hope so." Because what neither of them knew was that inside Montgomery Enterprises, someone was hiding a secret worth millions of dollars. And Ethan was about to stand close enough to the front door to see everything. Monday morning arrived with freezing rain. Ethan stepped out of a taxi 3 blocks from Montgomery Enterprises. Normally, a black SUV would drop him at the private underground entrance. Not today. Today he wore a dark navy security uniform. His expensive watch was gone. So were his designer shoes. He'd even moved temporarily into a modest apartment owned by the company so nobody could connect him to the Montgomery family. When Ethan approached the building he'd entered thousands of times before, it suddenly looked different. People rushed around him. Nobody stepped aside. Nobody greeted him. Nobody knew him. For the first time in his adult life, Ethan Montgomery was invisible. "New guy?" Ethan turned. A heavy-set man in his late 50s stood behind the security desk. "Ethan Miller?" "Yes." "Frank Davis. Security supervisor." They shook hands. Frank handed him a radio. You're at the main entrance. Employees badge in. Visitors sign in. Deliveries go through the loading entrance. Executives will occasionally pretend those rules don't apply to them. Ethan smiled. What do I do then? Smile while reminding them that they do. By 7:30, the lobby was packed. Hundreds of employees moved through the revolving doors. Good morning. Nothing. Morning. Nothing. Have a good day. A few people smiled. Most ignored him. Then a woman approached. Early 30s. Expensive gray dress. Designer handbag. Her ID badge read. Vanessa Reed, Senior Vice President, Corporate Development. She walked straight past the sign-in desk. Excuse me, Ms. Reed. She stopped. Slowly. What? Your badge didn't scan. I need you to sign in. Vanessa looked at him. Then at the clipboard. Then back at him. Do you know who I am? Yes, ma'am. Then you know I don't need to sign anything. Company security policy requires. Not today. She started walking. Ethan stepped slightly to the side. I can't allow you through without verification. Her eyes widened. Are you stopping me? I need to verify your access. Vanessa laughed. She looked toward two nearby employees. Is he serious? They laughed nervously. Vanessa leaned closer. What's your name? Ethan. Well, Ethan, here's some free advice. If you want to keep this job, learn which employees matter. She tapped his badge with one finger. Because you don't. Then she walked away. Ethan watched her enter the elevator. Frank came beside him. You okay? Does she treat everyone like that? Frank chuckled. That was Vanessa being friendly. Ethan looked toward the elevator. Interesting. He had met Vanessa many times before. At board dinners. At corporate events. Around his mother, she was charming. Respectful. Almost excessively polite. Yet 30 minutes into his first shift, Ethan had discovered a completely different woman. Maybe his mother had been right. At 8:03, another woman entered. She wore a simple blue dress beneath a winter coat and carried a laptop bag in one hand and 2 cups of coffee in the other. One cup slipped. Ethan caught it before it hit the floor. Oh. She laughed. You just saved my morning. Happy to help. She glanced at his badge. Ethan. New here? First day. Then welcome to Montgomery Enterprises. She handed him the coffee. This one's yours. Ethan blinked. I can't take your coffee. You caught it. That's basically ownership. He laughed. Thank you. I'm Rachel Bennett. Her badge identified her as a financial analyst. Before leaving, Rachel looked toward Frank. Morning, Mr. Davis. Morning, Rachel. Then she greeted the receptionist. Good morning, Tina. Ethan noticed something. Rachel knew everyone's name. Not just executives. Everyone. The next morning, she greeted him again. Morning, Ethan. On Wednesday, she stopped. How's the new job? I'm surviving. Give it 2 weeks. Does it get easier? No. You just get better at pretending. He laughed. Rachel became part of his mornings. Sometimes their conversations lasted 10 seconds. Sometimes a minute. She never knew he was wealthy. She never knew he could influence her career. To Rachel, he was simply Ethan, the security guard. And she treated him like he mattered. 3 weeks passed. Ethan began noticing patterns. There was Daniel Brooks, a junior accountant who always looked terrified when his manager appeared. There was Mrs. Evelyn Carter, a 64-year-old custodian who worked nights and sent most of her paycheck to help her daughter raise 2 children. There was Frank, who had worked security for 12 years without a meaningful raise. And there was Rachel. Brilliant. Hardworking. Overlooked. One Thursday evening, Ethan was doing his rounds when voices echoed from a conference room. You changed my report. It was Rachel. Ethan stopped. Inside was Rachel's manager, Marcus Hale, Director of Financial Strategy. I improved it, Marcus said. You removed my name. Because I'm presenting it. I spent 3 weeks building that analysis. And I supervise you. Rachel stared at him. That doesn't make my work yours. Marcus stood. Careful. Excuse me? You're talented, Rachel. Don't ruin your career because you need applause. I don't want applause. I want credit for my work. Marcus stepped closer. People who move up in this company understand hierarchy. And people who steal their employees' work? Marcus's expression hardened. You should go home. Rachel picked up her bag. When she stepped into the hallway, she saw Ethan. For a moment, neither spoke. You heard that? Some of it. Rachel looked embarrassed. Forget it. You shouldn't let him treat you like that. She gave him a tired smile. I have rent. Student loans. A mother who depends on me. Marcus has friends on the executive floor. She pressed the elevator button. Sometimes being right isn't enough. The doors opened. Before stepping inside, she looked back. Good night, Ethan. Good night. The doors closed. Ethan stood there for a long time. Then he pulled out the small notebook his mother had given him. He wrote. Marcus Hale, investigate. But Marcus wasn't the real danger. Not even close. Charles Whitmore, chief operating officer of Montgomery Enterprises, was one of Victoria's oldest friends. He had joined the company 22 years earlier. He attended Ethan's college graduation. He'd spent Thanksgiving at their home. When Ethan's father died, Charles had stood beside the family at the funeral. Ethan trusted him. Victoria trusted him. The board trusted him. But downstairs, people feared him. Not because Charles yelled. He rarely did. His power worked differently. People who challenged him disappeared. One morning, Ethan overheard two warehouse managers speaking near the lobby. Another payroll complaint? 3. What happened? HR closed them. Why? The man lowered his voice. Whitmore. Ethan looked up. Later that night, he found Mrs. Carter cleaning the lobby. Can I ask you something? Sure, baby. Do employees ever complain about missing pay? She stopped wiping the counter. Why are you asking? Just heard something. She looked around. Then lowered her voice. My nephew works at the distribution center. And? They owe him nearly $4,000 in overtime. Did he report it? Twice. What happened? Nothing. Why hasn't he gone outside the company? Mrs. Carter gave him a sad smile. People with families don't always have the luxury of becoming heroes. That sentence stayed with Ethan. He began listening more carefully. And the more he listened, the worse it became. Over the next month, Ethan collected stories. Overtime mysteriously missing. Employees pressured to work off the clock. Complaints disappearing. Promotions handed to friends. Workers who spoke up suddenly receiving poor performance reviews. But there was something else. Money. Large vendor payments had been approved for companies Ethan didn't recognize. Rachel noticed it too. One evening, she approached the security desk. Ethan? What's wrong? Nothing. But she looked nervous. You sure? Rachel glanced around. Can I ask you something weird? Go ahead. If you saw something at work that looked wrong, would you report it? Depends. On? Whether I had evidence. Rachel lowered her voice. I found something. Ethan's pulse quickened. What? Payments. To who? I don't know yet. Then find out. She stared at him. You sound strangely confident for a security guard. Ethan smiled. I watch too many crime shows. She laughed. But the fear didn't leave her eyes. Be careful, Ethan said. Rachel nodded. You too. The next morning, her computer stopped working. By lunch, her access to several financial systems had been revoked. Marcus told her it was a technical issue. Ethan didn't believe him. Neither did Rachel. Then, 2 days later, Rachel didn't come to work. Ethan texted her. No answer. The next morning, she still didn't appear. Then Frank told him. They fired Rachel. Ethan stared at him. What? Yesterday. For what? Don't know. Ethan's chest tightened. He waited until his break, then called her. This time she answered. Ethan? What happened? Silence. Then Rachel spoke. They said I violated company data policy. Did you? No. What did you find? Another pause. Ethan, forget it. Rachel. I can't. Why? Because somebody followed me home last night. His expression changed instantly. What? A black SUV. From the office to my apartment. Did you call the police? I didn't have proof. Where are you? Home. Don't delete anything. Don't talk to anyone from the company. Rachel sounded confused. Ethan, why are you talking like you can do something about this? He stopped. Because for the first time, maintaining his disguise was putting someone else at risk. But revealing himself could destroy the investigation. I know people. What people? Just trust me. Rachel laughed bitterly. Trust the security guard? Yes. Silence. Then she whispered. Okay. That evening, Ethan met his mother privately. Victoria listened without interrupting. When he finished, her face had changed. You believe Charles is involved? I don't know. Charles has been with us for 22 years. I know. He was your father's best friend. I know. Victoria looked away. Ethan placed several documents on the table. But these approvals lead back to his office. Victoria examined them. Where did you get these? Employees. She looked at her son. 6 months earlier, Ethan barely knew those employees existed. Now they trusted him with information they were afraid to give executives. Victoria understood that her experiment had become something much bigger. Continue, she said. Mom. Continue the assignment. And Rachel? I'll make sure she's protected. Ethan nodded. Then Victoria said something he wasn't expecting. Don't trust anyone upstairs. Anyone? Anyone. Including, Ethan realized, perhaps his own mother. Ethan returned to work as if nothing had happened. Charles Whitmore walked past him every morning. Morning. Good morning, sir. Charles never recognized him. Then one afternoon, Charles stopped. What's your name? Ethan Miller. Charles studied his face. Have we met? Ethan's heart pounded. I don't think so, sir. Charles stared for another second. Then smiled. Keep up the good work. As he walked away, Ethan knew something had changed. That night, someone broke into Ethan's locker. Nothing valuable was inside. But his notebook was gone. The next morning, Charles walked through the lobby. He looked directly at Ethan. And smiled. Ethan knew. His cover had been compromised. At 10:30 that night, Ethan left work. A black SUV waited outside. The rear window lowered. Charles sat inside. Get in. Ethan didn't move. Charles smiled. Or should I call you Mr. Montgomery? Ethan's blood ran cold. He entered the vehicle. Charles poured himself a drink. Your mother sent you to spy on us. She sent me to learn. Same thing. Charles opened Ethan's notebook. You've been busy. Ethan stared at him. You fired Rachel. Rachel fired herself. She found the payments. Charles smiled. You're smarter than I thought. How much? Excuse me? How much have you stolen? Charles laughed. You think this is theft? What would you call it? Compensation. For what? Building your mother's empire while she became a legend. Ethan felt sick. Charles continued. Do you know how much money I've made this company? And that gives you permission to steal from employees? Don't be dramatic. You took overtime from people earning $40,000 a year. Charles leaned forward. I can make this disappear. Ethan frowned. Your investigation. Rachel. Everything. Why would I want that? Because someday this company will belong to you. Charles smiled. And when it does, you will need people like me. Ethan stared at him. Then Charles said quietly. I can make you richer than your mother ever was. Ethan smiled. There's one problem. What? You think everyone has a price. Everyone does. No. Ethan opened the SUV door. You just haven't met the right people. He stepped onto the sidewalk. Charles called after him. You're making a mistake. Ethan turned. No, Charles. His expression hardened. You did. 2 weeks later, every senior executive was summoned to an emergency board meeting. Nobody knew why. Rumors spread throughout the building. Victoria was retiring. The board was replacing her. The company was being sold. At 9 a.m., Victoria entered the boardroom. Charles sat confidently near the head of the table. Marcus sat beside him. Vanessa Reed was there too. Good morning, Victoria said. The room quieted. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for Montgomery Enterprises. Charles smiled. I will officially retire as CEO at the end of this meeting. Whispers erupted. And I will announce my successor. Charles straightened his jacket. He believed it would be him. Then the doors opened. Ethan entered. In his security uniform. Marcus frowned. Why is security here? Vanessa rolled her eyes. Charles didn't move. He already knew. Victoria smiled. Come in, Ethan. Ethan approached the table. Vanessa looked confused. Ethan? Victoria continued. Some of you know this man as Ethan Miller. She looked around the table. That isn't his name. Silence. His name is Ethan Montgomery. Vanessa's face turned white. Marcus stared. One executive whispered. Her son? Victoria nodded. My son. Nobody spoke. For the last 6 months, Ethan has worked anonymously among the people many of you rarely notice. Ethan removed his security jacket. Underneath was a white dress shirt. Vanessa remembered every cruel word she'd spoken to him. Marcus remembered ignoring him. Others suddenly remembered walking past him without saying good morning. Victoria looked around the room. My son wasn't downstairs to learn how to open doors. She paused. He was there to discover what happens behind them. Ethan placed a thick folder on the table. Over 6 months, I spoke with employees from security, maintenance, finance, distribution, reception, accounting, and administration. Charles remained silent. Ethan continued. I found unpaid overtime. He placed one document down. Retaliation. Another. Workplace intimidation. Another. Fraudulent vendor payments. Charles finally stood. This meeting is over. No, Victoria said. Charles looked at her. Victoria's voice was ice cold. Sit down. Charles froze. Ethan continued. We identified $11.7 million in suspicious payments connected to shell companies. Gasps filled the room. Charles looked toward the door. It opened. Attorneys entered. Along with outside investigators. Charles looked at Ethan. You think you won? This wasn't about winning. Charles laughed. You're a spoiled child playing hero. Ethan looked at him. Maybe I was spoiled. He paused. But 6 months downstairs taught me something 20 years around people like you never could. Charles said nothing. A company isn't the executives sitting at this table. Ethan looked around the room. It's the woman cleaning the floor after you've gone home. The father working overtime at a warehouse. The receptionist being yelled at because an executive is having a bad morning. He looked at Charles. You stole from those people because you thought they were too powerless to fight back. Charles was escorted from the room. Then Ethan turned toward Marcus. Marcus immediately began talking. Ethan, whatever Rachel told you. Rachel didn't need to tell me. Marcus stopped. I watched you. There's context. There always is. I was under pressure. So was Rachel. Marcus looked toward Victoria. Mrs. Montgomery, I've given 12 years to this company. Victoria answered calmly. And Rachel gave 6. Marcus nodded quickly. Exactly. Victoria looked him in the eyes. So why did you believe her 6 years belonged to you? He had no answer. He was suspended pending investigation. Vanessa sat silently. Then Ethan looked at her. She couldn't meet his eyes. Ms. Reed. Yes? Do you remember my first day? Her face reddened. Yes. You told me to learn which employees mattered. Vanessa swallowed. Ethan paused. You were right. She looked up. Every employee matters. Later that afternoon, Rachel received a phone call. Ms. Bennett? Victoria Montgomery would like to meet with you. Rachel almost hung up. She assumed it was another trick. But 2 hours later, she stepped from the elevator onto the executive floor. Victoria greeted her personally. Rachel. Mrs. Montgomery. Thank you for coming. Rachel entered the boardroom. Then stopped. A man stood beside the window. Tall. Charcoal suit. Perfectly tailored. He turned. Rachel's mouth fell open. Ethan? Hi. She stared. Where's your uniform? He smiled. Long story. Then she saw the photograph on the wall. Victoria Montgomery standing beside a younger Ethan at a charity event. Rachel looked at him. Then Victoria. Then him again. No. Ethan laughed nervously. Yes. You're Ethan Montgomery? Yes. The billionaire's son? Technically. You let me buy you coffee. I liked the coffee. I gave you leftover lasagna. That was excellent lasagna. Rachel covered her face. Oh my God. For the first time in weeks, she laughed. Then her expression changed. You lied to me. Ethan's smile disappeared. Yes. Every day. I had to. You could have told me. I couldn't tell anyone. Rachel looked hurt. Ethan stepped closer. But everything else was real. She looked at him. The conversations. The friendship. What you told me about your father. None of that was fake. Rachel's eyes softened. Victoria quietly placed a folder on the table. Rachel, this belongs to you. She opened it. Her eyes widened. Director of Financial Strategy. I don't understand. Victoria answered. An independent team reviewed your work. Ethan added. Your forecasting model saved Montgomery Enterprises more than $8 million last year. Rachel looked stunned. Marcus said the board rejected it. He lied. Tears filled her eyes. All this time. Ethan smiled. You deserved the promotion before I ever met you. Rachel looked down at the offer. Then at him. This isn't because I was nice to you? No. Ethan shook his head. Being kind shouldn't buy promotions. He smiled. Your work earned this. Rachel finally smiled. Then I accept. 6 months after Victoria retired, Montgomery Enterprises looked different. Not because Ethan fired everyone who had been rude to him. He didn't. Being unfriendly wasn't a crime. But corruption, retaliation, wage theft, discrimination, and abuse of authority were no longer hidden behind impressive titles. An independent employee protection office was created. Anonymous complaints went directly to an outside ethics team. Overtime policies were audited. Workers who had been underpaid received compensation. Managers were evaluated partly on how they treated the people below them. Frank became director of corporate security operations. Mrs. Carter received a raise and eventually moved into a supervisory role. Rachel became one of the company's most respected young leaders. And Ethan? He became CEO. But he kept one thing from those 6 months. His security badge. Ethan Miller. It remained inside the top drawer of his desk. One morning, Ethan arrived at headquarters in a black SUV. His assistant opened the door. Morning, Mr. Montgomery. Morning. He entered the lobby. A newly hired security officer stood beside the entrance. Ethan stopped. Good morning. The young man looked surprised. Good morning, sir. What's your name? David. Ethan held out his hand. Nice to meet you, David. I'm Ethan. David laughed nervously. I know who you are, sir. Ethan smiled. Then we're even. As Ethan walked toward the elevator, Rachel approached carrying 2 coffees. CEO Montgomery. Director Bennett. She handed him one. Still taking coffee from employees? Only when they insist. The elevator opened. Before entering, Ethan looked back across the lobby. Executives. Assistants. Security officers. Custodians. Receptionists. Different salaries. Different titles. Different responsibilities. But none of them invisible. Because Ethan had learned something his business degree never taught him. Money can tell you how successful a company is. But it cannot tell you what kind of company you built. For that, watch what happens when the CEO isn't in the room. Watch how the manager speaks to the assistant. Watch how the executive treats the cleaner. Watch how people behave towards someone they believe has nothing to offer them. Because respect given only to powerful people isn't respect. It's strategy. And character? Character is how you treat the person whose name you think you'll never need to remember. Ethan had entered Montgomery Enterprises expecting to prove he was ready to become CEO. Instead, he discovered that leadership had nothing to do with the office waiting for him on the 58th floor. His greatest lesson came from standing on the ground floor. Opening doors. Checking badges. Being ignored. And learning the names of the people who had been invisible for years. Years later, when reporters asked Ethan Montgomery what transformed him into the leader he became, they expected him to mention his mother. His MBA. A major acquisition. Or some brilliant business decision. Instead, Ethan would reach into his desk. Pull out an old security badge. Place it on the table. And say, 6 months wearing this taught me more about leadership than 32 years of privilege ever could. And whenever someone asked what the lesson was, his answer remained the same. If you want to know someone's true character, don't watch how they treat the CEO. Watch how they treat the security guard. Because sometimes the person holding the door isn't beneath you. Sometimes he's learning exactly who you are. And sometimes he owns the building. Thanks for watching.